Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining the 15th and the final session of the Marketing Cloud Personalization series. So firstly, I would like to thank all the speakers involved in this series, without whom this series wouldn't be possible. And today's session is mainly focused on the strategy and a demo. And this session is going to be something different. And kudos to Jacob and Pratik for coming up with this idea. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat window so we can answer them at the end of this session. And if you have missed any of the previous sessions, they're all recorded and uploaded to the YouTube channel at the rate MC Learning Camp, or you can also check by the name Trailblazing Together. So we do also have the Slack channel where you can get your questions answered. If any questions are there post this session, you can post the questions in the Slack channel. The Slack is also mclearningcamp.slack.com. And any questions, now you can reach out to me. Any technical questions related to this session, Jacob and Pratik are active on the LinkedIn. So I'm speaking on behalf of you, Jacob and Pratik. So I hope you're okay with that. So Jacob is also active on LinkedIn. I'm not sure about Pratik. So please reach out to them, or you can also use the Slack channel. And with that, thank you, Jacob and Pratik, for today's session. So as I said, so today's session is going to be something different, and you're going to learn a lot from this session, and also you will be able to connect all the things that you have learned in the previous sessions. So this is like bringing everything to the implementation, to the life, as the name says it all. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Jacob and Pratik.
All right, sounds good. Thanks, JB. So yes, you gave us a little bit of an intro, and so thanks everybody for joining. As the name says on the slide, we're trying to overarchingly help everyone understand how to bring a strategy to life with Marketing Cloud Personalization. Originally, JB, thanks for inviting me to speak. I really wanted to include Pratik. Pratik is one of those individuals out in the personalization industry who's really, really good. I like to view him as one of my mentors. He's taught me a lot about this platform and personalization in general outside of technology. And so I figured, like JB had said, let's do it a different way. Let's have myself and Pratik talk to you guys a little bit about just how to bring kind of a data-driven focus to your strategy and making sure Marketing Cloud Personalization is successful. So with that being said, let's go into some intros. So who am I? Jacob Hayes. Currently, I'm a personalization practice lead at Silverline, which is an SI partner out in the industry. I've been almost 10 years now of consulting experience and technical experience in the Salesforce ecosystem. I'm now at 9X certified. Really, a lot of my engagements and what I have done when I worked with Pratik at Salesforce Professional Services and also at other SI partners is focusing on an omni-channel view or cross-channel view of a marketing strategy. And so there's a lot of synergies and things that Pratik and I have worked on, but it's enough about me. Hand it over to you, Pratik. Give a little intro to the folks.
Absolutely. I'm just going to wait for the slide. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, so I've been mentioned already, but I'm Pratik, and I'm out of the East Coast, the Northeast to be specific, here in the US. Formerly, about a year ago, I actually left Salesforce, formerly the personalization practice lead at Salesforce. And then, more recently, about a year ago, I left to start my own firm specializing in personalization strategy and implementation. Definitely, obviously, focusing on Marketing Cloud Personalization, but kind of expanding into Marketing Cloud Journey Builder, as well as Data Cloud, and just kind of the whole concept around personalization and as it relates to the technology. Yes, I'm definitely active on LinkedIn. So if you want to connect, you can email me, or you can definitely LinkedIn DM me. No worries.
All right. Thanks, Pratik. So what's the agenda for today? We're going to start with, walking through what we view as the challenge within the personalization environment, where to start from a customer lifecycle perspective, how we look at business value maps, as well as use case prioritization and roadmap, and going into a demo deep dive that Pratik will lead, which I believe you guys will really like it. And then finally, we'll come back with showing you some additional resources to continue your journey with personalization, knowing that this is the last session, which thank you, JB, again, for hosting all of these. And then at the end, we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. We'll answer any questions that have come through in the chat. And then also we'll just do a Q&A back and forth between Pratik and myself. All right, so with that being said, let's talk about the challenge real-time personalization is solving for clients and for your customers. Whether it's subscription-based companies, content driven companies that are also selling maybe a product or a service or a retailer, how can they get to that one-to-one communication level with customers with relevance and at scale? And so the first problem that we see out in the industry, in all industries, is companies are investing a lot in technology where people data and customer data is stored. The access to that data is fantastic, but it's usually living in a silo that they're probably not talking to one of these systems. This can lead to a fragmented or unclear understanding of the individual or person you're trying to engage with. And when marketers don't know or they can't respond to an individual or business, they often end up providing static experiences that just aren't engaging or personal at all. And that disjointed experience leads to, most of the time, dissatisfaction, and conversion rates drop off in engagement after a customer or visitor, completes an initial task, or it's just not going through the nurturing journey that the marketer believes they should go through. The lack of engagement also interferes with, the content that the marketer is trying to show. And if they can't show the content and it's not working correctly, we can't push them down the funnel to a moment in time where they act. So from reading a content piece to making a purchase to taking action, if you can't have that consistent experience, you're going to have high bounce rates, etc. So where does that come into play? Then our solution and the solution approach of kind of personalization allows us to provide customers who are working with, our clients, the most vivid understanding of each person and how that person is engaging with clients across channels. And so that's either on their website, in store, mobile app, or call center. Now, a lot happens with customer visitors before they ever identify themselves, before they raise their digital hand. And that information is critical to have in a system like personalization that's tracking deep browsing behaviors in both the anonymous state as well as the known state to get a sense of what areas are relevant to the individual perusing a website or perusing a digital property. If that data is available to us, then it's really important that we start to use that data in real time to guide prospects down the conversion funnel, to either serve relevant messages or providing content in the channel which what they're engaging. And so how does that work? We look at this continuum and we say, how are we understanding what the individual is doing so that we can make a decision and invest and eventually engage with them in the right moment at the right time? And then throughout the rest of it, we're always trying to analyze and understand who Rachel is or who customer is from that real-time approach and trying to get to a one-to-one understanding. So let's give an example. So if Rachel exists in our ESP or in Sales or Service Cloud, and you need to stitch all that data together, that known data along with anonymous data, that is, because now we know who Rachel is by moving through this continuum of having her identify herself. We're able to say, what are her interests? What are her affinities? What's her conversions or intent? And by having a vivid picture of her and providing that ability to then post it or activate it to other channels, we can talk with Rachel in the way that she wants to be spoken with. And so I think we've kind of hit on it in a couple of slides before, but personalization provides enormous value throughout the customer lifecycle. And that real-time personalization or interaction management can impact and improve metrics that we see before, after, or even during a conversion state. The ultimate goal for everybody, hopefully when you're watching this video or listening live, is you want to be relevant. You want to help your customers or prospects at whatever stage they're in with your brand. And so by identifying your own goals for each stage, as you can see from onboarding all the way to retain, you'll be in a good position to design personalization use cases that will best meet the goals and help customers progress through their journeys. But at the end of the day, you always need to be thinking about the needs of those customers or even anonymous individuals or visitors on your website. Because typically at each stage of the funnel, you plan and design use cases depending on what data and what specific activations you know about these individuals. So a couple of different additional pieces here before I pass the mic over to Pratik is, so start by identifying your business objectives and key metrics for each stage of the customer lifecycle journey. So that starts with the awareness, consideration, conversion, retention, or whatever your customer's journey looks like with the brand. Then determine the type of personalization that would move prospects forward, like we talked about down the funnel. Again, personalization must be data-driven. I can't say that enough, and Pratik will hit on that point in a few seconds. Collecting your behavioral and attribute data to understand interests, preferences, intents, got to do it. It's your critical component, and you need to understand what moments in time throughout your journey you should be collecting data or you have missing data. And so with all of that being said, I don't want to belabor the point anymore. Pratik, I'm going to hand the mic over to you, and you can take the next couple slides.
Absolutely. So I think Jacob, you touched on a couple of things, right? It's a matter of being relevant, and I would add it's a matter of also removing friction points, right? So as you're conducting, regardless of the industry, as you're conducting your particular funnel for a customer, the experience, the journey that they're taking with you as an organization, the idea is making sure that wherever they are in that experience, wherever they are in that journey, you want to be extremely relevant to that particular step. And it's not just a matter of pushing them down. It's also, if for some reason you need to push them back up, being able to actually detect that, you know what, they're at this step, but I actually need to move them back up, be relevant to that step, and then push them back down. And understanding that obviously requires a lot of signals coming in from a data perspective, platform perspective, and then understanding what those signals are and pushing them back out. But let's focus in on understanding those signals, right? So I think Jacob really did a great job there about, we want to be data driven. We want to understand what is our purchase funnel, what is our form funnel, service funnel, whatever that funnel looks like for your particular client. It's a matter of understanding where the customer pain points lie. What's the biggest opportunity that we have, right? A lot of times we'll hear in the e-commerce space, we want to do abandoned cart. A lot of times we'll hear that we want to do abandoned browse. The reality is not every customer has the same size abandoned problem. They might actually have a bigger opportunity somewhere else. And the matter of fact is, we want to solve the biggest opportunity, the biggest pain point that we can, because that's the thing that's going to generate that ROI. If we can, let's say, if we've got an onboarding problem for a customer, we want to push them down the funnel. So where does that take us, right? This is an entire exercise around being as strategic as possible and removing the lens of the platform for a second, but making sure that we have platform capabilities that map to our actual business objectives. So, Jacob did a really good job of kind of explaining that this is a matter of understanding what those business goals are as data-driven as possible, understanding the customer pain points, and then mapping them to, all the capabilities you've seen thus far in this series. How do we map those together? This is the biggest pain point, the biggest opportunity for us to go after. Let's map that to what MCP can actually do. So Jacob, if you don't mind just going to the next slide. Right, and once we understand that, hey, XYZ pain point, abandoned problem, onboarding problem, retention problem, there is a magnitude of that problem based on our data-driven understanding of that funnel. There's a magnitude, and if we can actually increase the needle or uptick the needle there by X percent, then that will lead, at the end of the day, all of this is just a revenue problem. That will lead to XYZ revenue in the future. We can start to understand the business value mapped back to what it all matters, dollars and cents, mapped back to dollars and cents if we're able to solve that problem. And Jacob, if you just build the slide out here, then we start to actually look at, well, how do we, what's in between? Everything's a revenue problem if you want it to be, but there's something in between there, right? It's not just abandoned problem, revenue problem, put them together. There's something in between that's causing this issue. Either it's an understanding of the site traffic, it's reduction in that cart abandoned based on maybe that we're not putting the right products in front of them. What are those marketing objectives that actually lead to these issues? Maybe it's an understanding of what our loyalty program is and making sure that folks understand that there's value here. Right? Everything could be a revenue problem if we decide it to be just a revenue problem, but there's something in between, and that qualitative measurement of what the problem is where we can start to understand what are those tests and use cases we want to go after from a personalization lens. We start to understand what are those things and patterns we need to build out in MCP. And we can map that all back to that data-driven activity that we took and said, if we can solve this problem, we have the potential to uplift by X percent. We start to now perceive value, a business value for every use case we're coming up with. We understand a business value to them. We can start mapping them against each other. So Jacob, if you don't mind going to the next slide there. It starts to break out now. So you've started to map a business value to each one of these problems. You can map it back to that life cycle. Each one of the problems is mapped to a particular step in the funnel. Now we're showing you an e-commerce funnel, but the reality is it can be any funnel. It can be a FinServ funnel. It can be transportation funnel, whatever the funnel is, whatever makes sense for your particular organization or your client's organization, we want to be able to map those key pain points to a particular step based on data-driven understanding of those pain points, and then say, if we do personalization, if we're relevant, we potentially, as our hypothesis, can uplift or uptick this particular metric by X%. Jacob, next slide there. So what does this look like when it's all said and done, right? Obviously, we're kind of talking about a very, very rigorous, intensive strategy workshop, but there's an output to this, right? So if we are able to understand our key pain points, understand the metrics behind those pain points, understand if we were to solve those metrics, understand if we were to solve those pain points, what potential lift can we create? We can start to map a business value for each one of those use cases because we know what the use cases are from platform capability. So if we have an onboarding problem, we can do a new visitor education pop-up and banner. So that's number one. And if we have a massive onboarding problem for a particular client, for a particular organization, we can say there's tremendous value for this use case. So you can see number one on the right side has a tremendous value for this particular client that this was prepared for. They have an onboarding problem. There's tremendous value of doing this use case. And we have that hypothesis, and we can go test that. You've seen A/B testing capabilities in the platform. You've seen use case testing. You've seen control groups, et cetera, et cetera. We can go test whether that's going to move the needle. And we can perceive, based on everything you've seen so far, what is the complexity of doing a use case like that? So now we've got a matrix of perceived business value and technical complexity. Now we understand what the low-hanging fruit, that top left, tremendous business value for our client, low lift from a technical perspective. Those are the things we want to go after first, because we can map them back to pain points we want to solve, our biggest opportunities. We know what the key marketing patterns are. We want to go test whether this is going to move the needle for us. And we've got what we would basically call a roadmap. We know what we want to go after first, and we know what we want to go after next. We can start to iterate around these use cases, but of course, having an understanding of what can this platform do, what are the capabilities, what are all the different use cases. You can see some on the left side. It's not a holistic list, but it's fairly thorough in terms of what we see out in the market. What are those use cases that pertain to my particular client? And then start to map assignments based on business value and complexity. And that's your roadmap. That's what you need to go after. That's what you need to go iterate, test, validate those hypotheses. So if we take this exercise in the truest sense, right? It's a guardrail. It's not intended for you to just copy and mimic word for word, but use it for what's relevant. Use it for what makes sense for your particular client. Use it for what where you believe there's value, and implement it on the client side as you wish. But if we were to use this particular methodology, what kind of potential ROI, what kind of potential value can we create? And so this is actually a use case that is a real live client. We did take them through this methodology. The first thing we said was, great, you have MCP. Let's pause and let's not talk about MCP at all, right? We know what it's capable of. We know what it can do. We don't need to talk about the tech for a second. Let's talk about what your pain points are. And all we did was we really took their Google Analytics across their purchasing cycle and said, let's look at where your clients are struggling, right? Let's look at where you're actually frustrated. Of course, everyone in the room said we got to solve the abandoned problem. That's true. It's probably true on every e-commerce website. At some point, we should solve it. But the reality is it might not be the biggest pain point in the room. And for them, it wasn't. The biggest pain point for their room, in their room, was that they had an onboarding problem. And so without going too deep into the details, the long story short is we went through this methodology. We tried to understand what are those use cases that are actually going to move the needle for them. And let's go after those use cases and let's measure it for over a 10-week pilot. And let's see what uplift we can create based on the hypotheses we made. And then based on those use cases, we're always going to have a champion and challenger. We're always going to have a control group. And coming out of that 10-week period, we'll just optimize and iterate, right? Champion, okay, test out a challenger. Okay, challenger one, all right, slight refinement, create a new challenger, challenger becomes a champion, and just continue that iteration until we really cannot create a further uptick, and that we've got our ultimate champion. But for the 10-week period, let's create a hypothesis and let's go after and see what we can do if we are extremely data driven. And over the course of the 10-week period, you guys know what the license cost for this MCP product is. Over the course of the 10-week period, MCP was actually able to uptick $4.5 million in revenue for this particular client over the course of that 10-week period. You know what the license costs, so you can kind of measure how you think about ROI and what ROI they were able to achieve in that 10-week period. Every use case from here on is really just bonus points for them, right? And so the best part about this was not only did they expand on this from those particular use cases that went live, they were actually able to iterate on those use cases, and those use cases started to generate even more and more and more revenue as they went on for the next couple of months. And eventually they hit a stabilization. They hit a point where they could not create even more revenue. And in parallel, they started to launch more use cases. If we go back to that matrix, they went after the top left first. But obviously there's more to that. There's the top right, where it's a little bit more complexity, but still perceived high business value. And in parallel, they went after those as well. And so they continue to push out use cases. And now you're starting to generate ROI around this product that starts to just scale and scale and scale, as long as we're thinking about the highest problem to solve, or the highest value problem to solve, the highest perceived business value in testing and iterating, and then just go after it, right? That's your roadmap. And it sounds simple. It is intended to be as simple as possible, but obviously there's a lot of alignment necessary. Your customer needs to be bought into this stuff. You have to bring the platform knowledge and the capabilities. But I think the intention of this series was to make sure you have the platform knowledge. And then of course, you guys will do what you guys do best, which is create the alignment in the room with your client. Help them understand why this is so important, that yes, Salesforce might have sold you abandoned cart, and that might be a problem you have, but let's take the hat off for a second in terms of what you were sold, and let's talk about what the biggest opportunity in the room is.
Yeah, I mean, be the consultants that, like Pratik is saying, take that moment in time and be the consultants that we know that you guys are on the phone, and understand that key moment in time to do the right thing for your customer. Just because a use case or theme comes along, try to dive into the data. And so with that being said, let's dive into a demo. So I'm going to hand over controls to Pratik, and Pratik's going to show you guys a really cool demo that kind of looks at the full life cycle of a use case and the structure. So Pratik, I'm going to stop sharing. Now it's you're up.
Yeah, let me just validate that I'm still logged in. Yep. All right. I'm going to share my screen, and if you, Jacob, don't mind just confirming you can see it.
Yep, you're good.
Awesome. Okay, so at this point, you already know what the event stream is, so I'm not going to really explain what I'm doing here in terms of MCP, but we're going to use the event stream to really understand what is it that we're looking at. And as Jacob said, my intention here is to show you kind of in a non-e-commerce fashion, because I feel like we exhaust e-commerce all the time around this product, but in a non-e-commerce fashion, my intention is to show you what do we actually see in terms of a funnel, and how can we intercept every step of the funnel to create a relevant personalization for a particular user. So I've set this up already, no different than what you've seen in this series so far in terms of segments and use cases and campaigns and et cetera. But I just want to quickly show you the segments I've created. So the first and foremost is I'm in a FinServ, financial services industry experience. Me as a client, I want to be able to see the most relevant, or me as an organization, I want to be able to serve the most relevant content for my particular user, also abiding by the fact that I'm a financial services institute, which means I have regulatory messages I have to show. Also, I have stakeholders and leaders who are like, you know what, I want to show this at a particular time. So trump the AI for a particular reason. Maybe it's, your CMO has some content piece that they want to push. Let the AI figure out the rest. And oh, by the way, if an abandoned form happens, I want you to, change the experience so that it's all relevant to that abandoned form. So there's a lot there. There's a lot of requirements. So all I've done is I've created some segments that folks will enter and exit in real time. So my regulatory segment says, If someone hasn't viewed the regulatory campaign at least 3 times, just keep showing it to them. The strategic segment says the same thing. If they haven't viewed it at least 3 times, just keep showing it to them. And then from an abandoned perspective, if someone has abandoned a form where they have done step 1 but not done step 2, you know what? That trumps actually what we're doing. And the way I've set the campaign priority is that regulatory trumps all, right? The government is saying we have to show this to you before we show you anything else, so we're going to do that. Strategic trumps everything other than regulatory because it's coming down from my CMO and I have to show you this content piece. Abandoned form trumps the AI because abandoned form is a behavioral action that I'm detecting that you did in your particular funnel step. And I don't want to show you AI relevant stuff when I know there's a particular thing that you're trying to do, maybe a mortgage application, and I want to intercept that signal. And then last but not least in that waterfall is, okay, if we've gone through all those steps, let the AI decide what gets shown. So what does that actually look like from an experience perspective? Let's go back to the event stream and we'll come here to Cumulus FinServe. Now I'm going to refresh the page so you can kind of see a fresh start, and I'm injecting, so you're going to see a little bit of a flicker. That's something, you're going to experience, and make sure you're worried about flicker all the time when you're doing site mapping. But I'm doing a demo here, so there's going to be flicker, and that's just something that's okay for now. So what am I being shown here? This is our regulatory message. Hey, please note XYZ. I'm being shown a regulatory message. So now I'm at the top of the funnel. I'm at the point where I'm landing on the website for the first time. I'm seeing a regulatory message. The government insists that I, as an organization, have to show you as a consumer this message. And I'm going to show it to you. No matter what step you are in the funnel, I'm going to keep pushing you there because I have to, based on my guardrails that I'm required to. On the MCP side, we can see here that someone just landed on the homepage and they were just shown a regulatory message. Now, remember, our segment says I have to be shown this 3 times as a consumer before I can move on from my particular curated experience. So let's just refresh one more time. That's 2. I've seen it twice, and let's refresh a 3rd time. I've now seen it a 3rd time. So what does that look like on the event stream side? You can see here that I've refreshed. I've seen regulatory 3 times. Okay, so me as an organization, I now know you're ready to move on from your particular experience. You've seen the regulatory message. I've abided by the law. I now can move on and start to do what my stakeholders want me to do, which is show you a strategic message. And so now I'm seeing a strategic message, which is, hey, I know where you are in your funnel, and I'm going to react to you in real time with a real-time signal by showing you the right content piece for the step you're in. And remember, the segment that we created for this is, I have to see this 3 times to make my stakeholders happy before I can create a different experience for you. And so I'm going to see it a 2nd time. I'm going to see it a 3rd time. And I want to just see what that looks like in the event stream so we can see I've seen it once. We're going to let the event stream refresh. Okay, and now I've seen it a 2nd time and I've seen it a 3rd time. Great. So now what would I expect? If we remember the priority of the campaigns, it was regulatory, strategic, abandon, and AI. So let's see what happens when I refresh. Well, there you go. I actually skipped over abandon and went to AI. So now if I keep refreshing, the AI is actually just trying to put stuff in front of me. And it's trying to get me to click on the Home Hero banner there in its AI fashion. It's showing me things that it believes might be relevant to try to get me to move further down the funnel. But what happened? I just mentioned that abandon was actually the 3rd priority over AI. Why did that not get shown? Well, obviously it didn't get shown because I didn't actually conduct an abandon yet. And so if you look here, I went from strategic straight into AI because I can detect that an abandon has not happened yet. And I can go ahead and skip that step of the funnel and move into the last step because I, as an engine, as a personalization engine or personalization expert, can detect that activity has not occurred and curate your experience accordingly. So what if I want to push you back up the funnel? I want to push you back into abandon because an abandon happens. Am I lost? Do I have the ability to push you back up? Well, the answer is of course. Priority driving allows us to move the person back up the funnel in this particular content zone. So if I, as I mentioned earlier, if I go to a mortgage loan and I click apply, I'm going to go ahead and use a different email address. I'm going to use September 22nd demo at yotmail.com. And I'm going to go ahead and click next. So now I've just conducted one step of the form. And we can see here that one step of the form did in fact come in. I'm not going to click the next button, which means I've now effectively abandoned the form. And so if I come back to Cumulus, I would now expect to be moved, or I would expect as a personalization expert, that this consumer that's viewing the web page right now would be moved up the funnel and be targeted with a particular content piece that is relevant to the activity that was just conducted. And that is exactly what happened. We now see an abandoned form here. And if I keep refreshing, the way I've configured this is I'm not going to let you get away with not clicking on this content piece unless a different relevant activity pushes you into a different, funnel or step or whatever it is. I'm going to keep showing this to you because the way I've configured it currently is just keep showing this to you until you actually take an action, because I know that you abandoned the form. And maybe that's not best practice. I'll let you guys decide what makes the most sense from a true strategic perspective, but that's the way I've configured the demo right now. So you can see every time I refresh, it's just going to keep showing me this abandoned form. Now, what happens on the event stream side? We can see here that I moved back up the funnel from Einstein back up to abandoned form. And if you remember, the way that I set the segment is just keep showing this until someone's clicked through. So let's click on it. I'm going to continue the form and I get brought back into the form itself. And now I'm starting to curate an experience for this consumer that's viewing the website by trying to push them into the most relevant page based on the activities and signals that I have. And so if you click here, someone's actually clicked on the abandoned form. And then if I click back here, I can see that I'm now okay to move into the AI piece, where the AI is just going to try to guess, because there's no other relevant information as part of my configuration. The AI is just going to try to guess what content piece might actually make me click through or move into the next step of the funnel. Last but not least, an interesting kind of bonus part here is we've got triggers. And so as part of an activity that was conducted, I can actually trigger an experience maybe outbound, right? Just because you abandon a form doesn't mean you're going to come back to the website and start looking at content. So just because you looked at an abandoned form and I've targeted you with abandoned content on the website doesn't mean that you're actually going to see it. So what I can do is I can take that signal, trigger you into a journey, and you can see right here that someone is in journey step 1. Potentially that's an abandoned form journey, whatever makes sense for your particular use case. But now all of this is being curated in real time, where the engine is doing the work for you in terms of sending out the right signals, sending out the right content, detecting the right signals, curating the experience up and down, upstream and downstream. And now the customer is just from the customer's lens, seeing the most relevant content piece in front of them. I'm going to pause there. Any
So Pratik, we did have one question in the chat, which I thought was pretty good. It says, the question it said, if I may, can you throw some light on how the web campaign is configured that helps customers move between funnels? So if you don't mind, we can take a second to walk through that.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's all about making sure you have the right understanding of priorities. And so if I look at the 4 campaigns that I created, you can see here that regulatory is the first one. Now I'm targeting the same content zone with all 4 of these campaigns. So if I'm targeting the same content zone with all 4 of these campaigns, I need to be very strategic in understanding what are the signals that are going to help me determine what the right content piece is, and then curate that based on the priorities of the campaign. So if I look at regulatory, you can see here that clicking regulatory, I'm targeting the regulatory segment, and then I'm assigning a priority to this campaign. Based on that priority versus, let's look at strategic. So you just saw that priority was 1,000, right? And now let's leave this one. Let's open up strategic. You can see that I'm targeting the strategic segment, but the priority of this campaign is 900. Technically, as a new user, I have both not seen regulatory 3 times and not seen strategic 3 times and qualify for the AI. All of those things are true. All of those campaigns are valid, but one campaign trumps overall all the others. And it's based on using the priority in a content slot that I can determine what the right campaign is at the right time down to a content slot perspective. And then of course, if you're starting to think about multiple content slots, now you start to think about, okay, you've got multiple content slots, multiple priorities against each one of those slots. This is really just a mapping exercise you're going to have to do as a consultant, as an expert around this tool, to make sure that you've got the right experience across all content slots, if that makes sense. Does that help answer the question?
Yep, there's a thank you for that. Good job, Pratik. Thanks.
Absolutely. Yep. Cool. Happy to talk about other questions. I know, Jacob, we wanted to go into kind of an open forum from here.
We're going to do one more slide just to round it out, and then we'll jump into the open forum. But yeah, you're right. So let's do this real quick. I'll take screen share back. I'll do the obligatory, does everybody see my screen and hear us again? Pratik, yes?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so you guys, that was a fantastic demo from Pratik. We will go into a Q&A in a few minutes, and I hope you guys have some questions for us on that front. But I wanted to round us out with one slide, which is we understand, and we've talked about with Pratik's slides earlier in the presentation with the understanding of the challenge and everything of like, how do you look at the use cases? If you want to take a couple of things away from kind of the 10-week workshop or quick starts, but also just try to transform and have a conversation with your clients or with in your own company about using the scientific method to determine a use case. And I always like to go back to like biology class in 8th grade to say, how can we make an observation, understand a question, run through a hypothesis, experiment, see if our conclusion was correct, and then is the results what we expected? If not, redefine and go from there. So that right-hand side of the screen is 8th grade biology. Left-hand side of the screen is what we're trying to do today. What we're trying to explain to you guys holistically, which is our hypothesis should be what we should be testing. The content experience should be where, the specific items that Pratik has shown and where we should be showing it. The segment itself is the promotion of that regulatory and other areas. Who should be getting what priority? And then where in the journey should they be seeing it? And then finally, again, we'll hit it almost 5 more times before the end of the conversation is, how are you going to measure it? And how are you going to show that you were successful and you met your goal? If you can't do that, sometimes you have to kind of have a tough conversation to say, should we even be doing this use case? So with that being said, a couple additional resources from documentation. And this is not an end-all be-all resource list, but we threw together some of the knowledge-based areas, especially related to use cases, items that we've seen throughout the kind of the series itself with some questions, as well as Marketing Cloud Personalization YouTube series, which has had 2 more videos be shown on it by the Salesforce support channel. They do a fantastic job. And then finally, if you have access to it, eCampus is a fantastic program for you guys to start learning. So with that being said, now we'll transition into Q&A. So let's look. It looks like there's one question coming in. But would MCP get Einstein 1? So Pratik, fun question for us based on Streamforce related content, which is, would MCP get Einstein 1 or related capabilities like bring your own machine learning model as shown in Dreamforce? Rock, paper, scissors. You want to go first? You want me to go first?
Yeah, you're ready to go first. Yeah.
Yeah. So as of right now, obviously Pratik and I don't work at Salesforce, but what we've seen from Dreamforce and the Einstein 1 capabilities, we do not know, and this is our own personal opinion, which I'll speak for Pratik in a second, and he can obviously add his color. I don't believe that will be the case, but that does not mean that we understand the roadmap and the future-looking statements of what Salesforce is looking to do with the Einstein 1 platform. The Einstein platform within the MCP platform itself, the decisionings and recipes engine are pretty well baked, but there might be changes. So with that being said, particularly, I miss anything that you would have liked to say there?
No, I think you hit the nail on the head, right? I think the answer is we just don't know. And that's just because Salesforce hasn't told us, right? So I think that's the answer. Yeah.
Yep, makes sense. All right. Are there any other questions, JB or team members? We're looking in the Q&A right now.
I think you covered everything in the chat. I have one coming in.
Okay. Good, or because I have questions that I can talk to Pratik about. So JB, did that question come through or no?
That's a generic question, Jacob. I'll put it forward. So, for
Okay.
someone who has not got the opportunity to work on the personalization, and somebody who are like they just want to learn personalization to be ready for the job when it comes. So, what do you suggest? So, when say, can someone set up their own website and go to their personalization demo org and do these configurations? You have any other ideas?
Pratik, I answered first last time. Your turn.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to answer in the context of a client site, right? So in my opinion, the best way to handle setting up for a client site would be to going into Marketing Cloud, going into their personalization studio, and opening up a test. We can call it whatever we want, test, staging, QA data set, and then doing all of your constructive activities around your site mapping in that data set before moving it into a production data set. And then once you've kind of, let's call it, propagated the code into your production data set, that staging QA data set serves as a playground where if you need to make any updates later on, you can go back to the QA data set and update your production ready code, play around in there, and then you do those propagations over time. So the first one obviously is the easiest because you get to kind of have a fresh data set. You can copy the data set over, and then over the next few iterations or the next iterations forever, you have to then do a copy paste mechanism from one data set to another. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense, Pratik. I have one more question. So when someone is implementing both MCP and CDP together, what are your recommendations about using Salesforce Interaction Library or the Evergage library?
Yeah, if you're implementing Salesforce Data Cloud and Salesforce Marketing Cloud personalization together, I would definitely use Salesforce interactions. Now, I would actually even go as far as saying, regardless of Data Cloud in the mix, I would use Salesforce interactions SDK. If you're starting with a fresh client or re-implementing a client, use Salesforce interactions SDK as you go forward. Salesforce has not said that they're abandoning the Evergage functionality, but Salesforce interaction actually gets you a little bit more functionality when as a developer and a little bit more seamless method creation in the SDK than Evergage does. It's also just a cleaner SDK. I would use that one in general if you get the opportunity on a go forward basis. And then from a data cloud perspective, I think it just makes sense.
Yep. Don't add any difference there.
Awesome.
Looks like there's one more question, JB.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, good. So Pratik, one more question in the channel is how realistic is it that a team without much experience could technically implement MCP in 3 to 4 months? And that phase one, the simple cart abandonment program that you talked about. I'll let you answer.
Yeah, so I'm gonna actually take it backwards. I would be careful discounting, or I would be careful downplaying the complexity of an abandoned cart program. I would actually argue abandoned cart is the most difficult use case you can do on this product. The reason for that is because for abandoned cart, you now have to have a complete understanding of all signals for this customer, right? What does that mean? You need to know all of their add to carts across mobile, across web, et cetera, you need to know all of their add to carts. Not a single add to cart button can be missing from what you're bringing into MCP. You need to know all of their update carts, all their remove carts, all of their cart views, all of their purchases, including offline purchases. All of those signals have to be coming to MCP for a real abandoned program to be powered. What do I mean by that? So if I was on web and I only track the add to carts on a PDP page, but I can add to cart on a quick view on PLP. Well, I'm actually not tracking a holistic cart view of a customer. So now, like I said, going back to it, you have to have every single signal in place, add to cart, update cart, remove from cart, view cart, purchase cart, across all of your channels, web, mobile, and POS, for an abandoned trigger to go out, abandoned journey to go out. Otherwise, you're going to run into issues of someone got an abandoned cart and they say, wait, I just bought this over here. Or, hey, wait, I actually removed that from my cart. Why are you telling me I abandoned it? I didn't, I took it out of the cart. So I would be careful discounting the complexity of an abandoned cart program. That being said, I think the question holistically is, how realistic is it that a team without much experience can technically implement in 3 to 4 months? I think that's really difficult for me to answer because I don't know the team, right? But what I would say is, if a team has no experience around this product, they're going to want to actually get experience before they go out and try to implement it, right? Learning as you go, we have found this product to be extremely, extremely difficult. You're going to pigeonhole yourself. You're going to get into a situation where you learn as you go, but you're deploying and you're pigeonholing the AI. You can't undo what it's learned. The data model, yes, you can delete stuff, but you can't undo what the AI's learned about it. The sitemap might actually bring in customers that are doing poor merging. You can't undo merges. You can't undo learned affinity. So the moment you go live, you're starting to pigeonhole yourself and you want to get it right. And so if the team doesn't have experience, I would strongly recommend they learn as much as possible before going into an implementation, because there are things here that you can't really pull back, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and just to add to what Pratik's saying there is, you can help them along the journey of understanding and learning the platform from day one when they've purchased, and if you're being brought as either on site as a client or on the client itself, or being brought on as an SI partner, you can work with them day one to start understanding what eCampus courses should they be taking, what other items should they be learning to understand the platform, but also drive their knowledge base to what we had talked about in this presentation throughout. Like, you'd mentioned simple abandoned cart. Pratik's answered it's not simple. So then why not take it a layer above? So go back up to the 50,000 foot view layer and just say, what sort of data are you seeing currently from your site? What sort of issues are we currently looking at? And you can help them along those lines, and then maybe come to a more concrete use case to get them live and seeing value of the product within a timetable that makes the most sense to them.
Awesome.
Cool.
Thanks, Jacob and Pratik. So I think you can go ahead with your
We'll do
interview.
So just because we didn't know if there would be any questions, I wanted to do a little mock interview. Pratik and I have known each other for long enough now. So Pratik, I'll ask you some questions, and then hopefully it provides value to the group here as a whole. So like, one of the biggest ones that I always try to ask, or I think is an interesting question, is what is an aspect of personalization implementation that's often overlooked? I think we've hinted on those in a couple of answers before. So what are your thoughts, Pratik?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think I touched on one, right? The complexity of getting a use case correct. I think putting the right experts behind this product is really, really important, because one of the aspects, bubbling that up, one of the aspects that's overlooked is how, let me frame it in a positive. It could be really, really powerful if you get it right. And we're seeing tremendous value from a lot of our customers. We've got I think about now 50 brands that we're managing on this product. Every single one of those brands is seeing ROI. Every single one of those brands is really happy with this product. But the reality is, there are a lot of people and a lot of folks, power users on this product, that have struggled with it. And I can be transparent on that. There have been folks that have struggled with this product. And it's because the initial implementation was done incorrectly. And getting that wrong either means you need to start over, which is frustrating, or you need to now do all of these exercises to try to figure out what users am I deleting because I got it wrong, or what affinities am I dropping because it's wrong, or how am I re-implementing the sitemap? And that causes a lot of churn, where doing it right the first time up front can get you a tremendous amount of ROI. And the other route, putting the wrong resources behind this, ends you up in a situation where there's just a lot of frustration. So I think summing this up, I think the part that's often overlooked is putting the right product expertise behind this product is super crucial to your success.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. I think just for everybody else as well, my only additional add-on, which is not much to add on, there was a good answer from Pratik, is if you look at it as the people, the process, and the technology, you really need to hit on all three components for to be truly successful within any technology implementation, and personalization is an example here. So what Pratik said, if you don't have the right people in place from either the client side or the SI partner side, you're going to struggle. And then if you don't have the right process in place to either do the handshake over or a handover of the personalization platform from an implementation team to a client's team, you're going to run into struggles. And then the technology, you just need folks who know the platform. And as you guys have been going through this 15-week series, you're getting more of an in-depth look into personalization than a lot of folks have had. So keep it on is my Matthew McConaughey moment for everybody. Keep learning, always be learning the best way possible. So second question for you, Pratik. In our roles as consultants and throughout your experience in your career, we're constantly working with clients on ways to show value to the business. So how do you help clients understand and communicate value from the Salesforce personalization platform? You've mentioned a couple examples, so could you expand upon it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to keep hammering this home because it's something that I just like say on every call pretty much, but it's about disconnecting from what you think good personalization looks like, right? It's about putting on the beginner's mindset and believing that, you know what, we might not know what personalization looks like for our particular use case, right? I think, again, I'm going to hammer this home, but every single e-commerce vendor will tell you we have an abandoned problem. That's totally true. But when we actually look into the data, there's a lot of other problems that we can go after. And some of those are actually larger opportunities in terms of perceived business value and eventually revenue, because it's all dollars and cents, right? So I think putting on that beginner's mindset and having that kind of conversation in the beginning, putting the product to the side, putting our beliefs and hypotheses to the side for a second, putting on the beginner's mindset, looking at the actual data across our funnel and saying, where do we see the problems? And then picking use cases that actually solve those problems, mapping them back to your customer experience, keeping that beginner's mindset on, going off and saying, we're going to test, we're going to iterate, we're going to experiment, and then going off and actually scaling. It's that beginner's mindset that I think makes the difference in terms of success here.
Fantastic. So last question from our side in our little mini mock interview, which is what does a mature personalization capability look like for an enterprise brand? What milestones do you think matter, knowing that you've worked with lots of transformational engagements in your career?
Yeah, I'm going to answer that in, let's say, 3 ways, right? So the first way I'm going to answer it is that, bringing it back to relevance, the first way I'm going to answer it is that regardless, as a consumer, regardless of the channel I interact with you on, you're going to speak to me like you know what you've talked about before, or what we've talked about before. So if I go on mobile, I'm seeing products that are relevant to as an example, if I'm looking at basketballs on web and then I switch to mobile, I continue to see basketballs. I'm not being shown baseball bats. I continue to see basketballs. So the first one is really just, if you've connected your personalization program omni-channel, where you're speaking to me like you know who I am across the channels, and you're continuing that conversation regardless of how I interact with you, I think you've hit a point of maturity. Number 2 is, so that's more like just omni-channel personalization. Number 2 is, if you're solving pain points, right? I think a lot of folks will say, give me the top 5 use cases I need to do to hit maturity. And I would say that's just not how I talk about maturity. If you're looking at the top 5 use cases, then what we really need to do is figure out what your actual opportunities are. Then we get to the actual use cases. If we kind of flip that on its head, the second point of maturity is, are you solving the largest pain points you have in a way that's meaningful and relevant to your customer? So if I've got an onboarding issue, right? I land on your website, you've got 2 million products in front of me, and you're being relevant by saying, hey, I know you were looking at particular pants in this style. I'm going to show you those particular pants in this, maybe they're, I don't know, leggings versus jeans or yoga pants versus whatever. I'm showing you a particular style because I'm continuing the conversation we've had, right? If you're solving your largest pain points in meaningful ways, I think you've hit the point of maturity. And then number 3 is just kind of a given, right? Are you seeing ROI from this product? I would argue that if you're not seeing ROI, you've not hit a point of maturity on this product, because every single customer we're working with, we've got them there. It required a lot of alignment on what those biggest problems are. It required a lot of, taking off the hat of this is how we do personalization and really focusing on what are those biggest opportunities, right? And once we did that, we found that ROI. So the third one is kind of the easy one. Are the dollars and cents coming back to you in a measurable way?
Yeah, I think it makes sense. All right. Well, with that, thank you, Pratik, for your time. Thank you, JB, for having us. You can still see our screen. Thank you in general. We do appreciate you guys running through the session with us today. I'll hand it back over to you, JB, to conclude the series. And thank you all.
This is fantastic, Jacob and Pratik. I can't thank you enough. You bring along multiple years of experience in the Marketing Cloud personalization, and what you have shared here is definitely helpful to everyone who is listening to this. And I see a lot of positive feedback in the chat. Goldmine and informative. I'm just reading out one. This is really a goldmine. Thank you, Jacob and Pratik. And we hope to see you again in some of the other sessions. And thanks everyone for joining today's session. And any questions, please post them in the chat or directly reach out to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.